Hi there. Welcome back. I'm Sheldon McLeod. This is the SaltWire Network. This is my show, Thinking Out Loud. And I don't know if you've ever spent a whole lot of time on social media. I do, partly for my job and for distraction, of course. Now, there's a whole lot of conversation right now going on about the social media platform TikTok. In fact, the government of Canada said no civil servants will be allowed to have that application on their device, and they talk about security risks. And of course, we also heard most recently there was a conversation about, well, Chinese influence on the Canadian federal elections, both the previous one and the one prior to that. Always enjoy my conversations with Robert Hewish. Dr. Hewish is an associate professor in the Department of International Development Studies, and so good to see you again. Thank you for doing this.
Always a pleasure, Sheldon. Thanks so much.
The host of his own podcast, GDP. You say season 11?
Season 11, yeah. We just turned another corner. We've had 20,000 listeners in 180 countries worldwide right now.
So what does one teach when they teach international development studies?
So we look at often the things that are going wrong in the world, that it's not so much about how to always make things better in terms of what future development could be, but we often look at issues of the big social inequalities, the big environmental, health, and economic consequences that come from development models. So our research and work takes us from Latin America all the way to the South Pacific and including parts of Asia to see just how the land and life of the planet shapes with each new government that tries to develop and grow economies and build relationships around the world.
And every time stories like this come up, I think I would love to be sitting in a classroom to hear what a professor has to say in teaching students about what's happening on the planet around us. So I'm sure there's been a conversation from your students who are engaged in social media. Is TikTok the, subversive force that people suspect it is?
It's definitely a force. There's no getting around that. I mean, it is an addictive thing to kind of go down the rabbit holes and spend time on it. So, as from the professor's point of view, we sometimes grumble when we see kind of eyes turning away from the pulpit in front of the lecture and kind of looking down at the phone, and then we hear the little TikToks going off in the background. Anyway, so that's one deal. But beyond the social media tool itself, the bigger concern here is how this app and platform came about and what is it doing with all the data mining. So right now with the government of Canada saying that's it, federal employees, get this app off your phone. Your kids can't play with it. You can't look at it. It's done. This is coming from echoing a concern, I should say, that other governments have also expressed. So in particular, Australia got a little bit sensitive to this back in the fall of 2022 when they realized that the data mining capabilities of TikTok were something that could put Australian federal servants at risk. And this, again, is coming on the backswing of proven interference that China has had in Australian and New Zealand elections. So the thing with TikTok is that the data collection methods that are used here, they really go deep into your phone. They look at your contact list. They look at your calendar. They scan hard drives of your phone and any ones that are external to it as well that are connected. And it also has a geolocating device trigger that can go on an hourly basis. So you put those things together, especially with someone's calendar and someone's geolocation, and you might have a problem. So that's where the worry, I think, comes from the federal government. The European Union has just implemented the same sort of precautions. But the other thing with TikTok that is unlike a lot of apps that are always mining our data and seeing our consumer habits and all this, is that when you tell most apps to stop, they stop. They're like, okay, sorry, we didn't know you didn't like it. Now we'll give that up. TikTok doesn't. It's persistent, and the depth of the backdoors that it can get into is also worrying. And so, as opposed to trying to really lock this app down, the safest bet for governments around the world would be like, get the employees off of it. It's even something they're considering and debating right now in the United States.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we'll see provincial governments follow suit. But if the data is specific to my device, and I think we're all at a point in this development or evolution of social media that if we're not paying for something, we are the product. And I don't put anything out that I don't care for anyone else to know. So is it really that insidious? Is it really that pervasive? Is it really digging that deeply into my data that would tell them about me, Sheldon McLeod, who lives in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I see you have so much data that this app is able to get out of every user that you're going to have this data mind, like just a tsunami, just a tidal wave of data coming at it. And data, as any researcher knows, is important, but what's more important is to know the right question to ask and what to do with it. So that's the big thing. When Facebook wants our data, they want to know what ads they can market to us, or what sort of fears and trepidations they can kind of play with us to market things in a certain direction. It's unclear what TikTok's agenda is, and it's also unclear what the parent company, which is called ByteDance, that its owner is one of Bloomberg's top billionaires in the world. We don't really know what their agenda is, or if there's some sort of relationship with the government of China to get access to that data. We know that's another big thing. If there is data desire by the government of China, they can find a way to get it if it's stored within their boundaries. But the bigger thing isn't so much about what you're expressing on TikTok or what maybe a federal employee is saying. It's knowing where that person is and where they're not and who they're dealing with. And that's something that we've even seen raise concern about, the smart homes and your Google Home and the Ring devices. It's not so much about what's going on there. It's that you can get this data in a way that can show someone's behavior about where they are, where they're not, and could that leave them vulnerable to some sort of a targeting situation. Now, there's no proof yet that those events have taken place, but the suspicion's really high. And what we're seeing, if we can just pull some data from the U.S. quickly, the FBI right now is opening a new case of foreign influence involving Chinese officials every 12 hours. So there's definitely some heat on this stove to say that we're worried in that way.
Giant balloons floating overhead, things bobbing in our oceans. There's so much surveillance that's happening, and it's top of mind right now. But I would suspect this is more like the policies to address having Huawei introduce 5G networks, concern that they would be reporting back sensitive information to the Chinese government. But it's my understanding TikTok's not owned by the government. It's, as you point out, a private investor. Those things, is it fair to connect the two, Huawei and TikTok, in that way?
So Huawei had really deep dealings with the Chinese government, in the sense that there was always going to be some financial support and cooperation going on in that way. And the idea that they would have the ability to have ownership or deep participation in foreign telecommunication networks, that just got to be too much for people to accept. The risk with this particular app is with TikTok is that we see how the government of China has behaved with other multi-billionaires who've developed very, very clever technology. I'm thinking about Alibaba and the folks that created WeChat, very popular apps within China that did have some global outreach. And one day they woke up and quickly the courts and the Politburo decided to say that that's it, you guys are shut down. And then when you're shut down, does that data get confiscated? I mean, we've seen stunts pulled like that in the past where it is arm's length, right? There was the case with vaccine development in China where, yes, it was an independent lab. It's not connected to the Politburo in Beijing. But then one day the customs gets the order to say, don't export any vaccines to foreign research partners. Done. What happens there? Confiscation of data. And I think that's kind of the long-term risk. And who knows what would happen in that circumstance. We see that China does actively pursue data mining in a wide range of fields. I mean, not just through technology. You mentioned the balloons, but there's also human intelligence tracking that they do on a widespread basis. So when all this data comes back, and they say, look, we've got these people who are talking about China on media and social media and popular radio, whatever it is. We've got other professors talking about this over here and your research over there. It's all very interesting, but it's kind of useless until someone's actually asking the right questions to do something with that data.
And as far as foreign interference in Canadian elections, is that something that bears fruit? Does that sit well with the professor? Is that something that you feel is happening? Should we have a committee look into that?
I believe so, and it's a thing where this might be a new chapter being written in the Canadian context, but it's coming out of the old book from Beijing once again, and we look at where the attempts of election interference have taken place in the country, in the countries around the world, and we see a record of it. New Zealand was very sensitive to being aware of Chinese interference in its national elections, especially the past three that saw Jacinda Ardern, rise to power there. Australia, same thing, that they were concerned about foreign influence there, and even the United States was sort of guarding itself about the potential for that as well. Now, the methods have changed from place to place, and this is what's really important. So in New Zealand, there was the initial attempt of trying to create similar influence in their elections by, having the local embassy or consulate kind of shovel money towards one candidate, or kind of get in the local Chinese media and say, this person over here, we'd like you to vote for them. But what they realized, though, is that New Zealand, as small as it is and as distant as it is incredibly good at using military intelligence, especially human intelligence, to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. So the security briefings that were going to the national government there were identifying this risk. Go down a level to the municipal level in New Zealand, municipal elections in Christchurch, Wellington, and Auckland were all other targets as well of foreign interference. Politicians, in that case, who don't have access to those security briefs. So when you see the potential for even wider expansion of Chinese influence in Canada's elections, I would be very curious to see if it actually stops at the federal level, and if there's not even provincial influences down the road to that group of politicians who don't get access to those briefings and who may not be aware that this kind of influence is occurring. It's a type of influence that CSIS has been warning us about for quite a while, and they say politicians, prominent business officials, and even academics are in the crosshairs for this.
Well, good words of warning and caution, and all the more reason for us to seek out and search out informed opinion like Professor Hewish's. As always, I really do thank you for your time for weighing in on these topics today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Sheldon. I always look forward to the next time.